It's my honor to introduce Dr. Robbie Tawill from the University of Rochester. He is a venerated clinician in the FSHD space. He decided to dedicate a lot of his research and his clinical practice to FSHD way before most people, and was really a pioneer, helped establish the national registry, FSHD registry at Rochester, and he's co-principal investigator or co-director of the Clinical Trial Research Network. So he is our go-to person for all kinds of questions about FSHD. And he has also been the principal investigator on a number of clinical trials. So he's done it all. And I will turn over the mic to Dr. Tawill.
And just for the parents here, just to add one component to that as well. So I have recently moved my daughter to his care and couldn't be more thrilled and happy to be having him helping me guide her through this whole journey. And it just from having him involved just is so great because he's one of the few doctors that I found that gives me opinions. So I appreciate the honesty, the feedback, and the fact that, you know, he's in it with us, which is the first time I've had a doctor really in it with me, in trying to figure this journey out.
Thank you, Kristen and June. What can I say about myself? I've been working on FSHD for many years now. This was shortly after the location on the gene on chromosome 4 was determined back in 1990. That's when I decided to, I was in my fellowship, was focusing on FSH muscular dystrophy. Everybody was thinking that, oh, now that we know where that gene is, we'll go after it and we'll be able to solve this mystery. Well, it took another 20 years because it's a complicated disease to get to where we can start to say that now we can approach this. We know exactly what the disease mechanism is, and this was in 2010. And since then, I've been working with Jeff Statland at KUMC in Kansas City, establishing the clinical trial network, and trying to kind of move things forward because the fact that we know what the mechanism is, there's still a lot of information that we need to obtain in order to make the population of patients with FSHD ready for clinical trials. And this is specifically acutely needed for the early onset FSH muscular dystrophy because they're a rather small population, small percentage of the population. It's been difficult to get enough patients to study what we call the natural history, which is, how fast does the progression happen and how can we measure that? And these are the two of the important things that need to be in place before clinical trials happen. And I know it's difficult for parents who have patients with early onset FSH because there's the severity is much more than what we see in the average patient who is adult onset or late teen onset. But there are certain things that have to be done. If not, you don't want to waste a lot of time doing clinical trials that are not well designed because we lack information and potentially use a drug that does not show benefit, but may, in fact, if we had all of the tools that we needed, that would show that benefit. And that's why we're now kind of really trying to expand our network of early onset FSH patients. We've always seen adult and early onset FSH in Rochester, but a lot of sites don't have that population, and we're targeting centers that have a lot of early onset FSH patients, and with investigators and clinical clinicians who are, very familiar with this condition.
There's one question that I get a lot, is that parents will say, but I have all the medical records. Why can't they just take the medical records and use that?
Right.
Why does it have to be in the consistent way that the clinical world needs it, versus all of us going to our independent doctors? Kate's been in physical therapy for 6 years. I've got 6 years worth of 3 months, every 3 months they do records on her. Why is that not something you can use versus getting into something like the MOVE study?
You can. I mean, if your daughter was, if everybody was being evaluated like your daughter has been on a regular basis, then we would have a common database that we can look at. But there's not a one way of dealing with patients with FSH, early onset FSH. So you'll have, even if you have all of the records and all of the patients who have early onset, it's hard to build that up because different physicians will have different approaches to looking at it. That's why you need kind of one reliable, reproducible measurement of function or strength over time. And the thing is, I mean, you'd say, well, if the drug works, it's going to work. It's going to be obvious that patients are going to get better. That would be, if a drug is so potent that it can do that. I mean, we don't expect any drugs like that. The other factor is, if somebody's already very weak, it's going to take time for them to recover. And we don't know how that recovery is going to happen. And it may take years. But so in addition to having the physical measurements that we do, what we need are biomarkers. Biomarkers these are anything that indicates to us any type of measurement in the blood or on a muscle biopsy or on an MRI that can tell us, even though that person is not stronger, there are signs that things are moving the right way. So again, I mean, so we need that to be able to do effective clinical trials that are not going to take years to complete. So you have to find all of those variables that we can measure that enables us to say that yes, things are getting better, and so we have a positive result here.
And that measurability needs to be done in a consistent way. Otherwise,
Right.
It's something that the FDA can't use as valid data, correct?
Right.
So when it comes to early onsets, we've just really started launching the chapter. Allie started this last year, and we're a little behind the 8 ball with the clinical trials that are getting into motion and all of that. What does this population need to do in order to catch up? What do we need to, how do we get involved? What do we need to be doing in order to get the kids on the roadmap of discussions, even having the discussions in the pharmaceutical world that kids should be considered in clinical trials?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the first thing to in discussions with pharmaceutical companies, but also with the FDA, is to really kind of emphasize to them, because everybody, the general impression of FSH is, oh, it's slowly progressive, it's not very severe. That's because that, a big chunk of the population, it is so, but it doesn't mean that patients are not disabled at various levels. But again, going back to the early onset, it's really important to show the FDA and the drug companies, mostly the FDA really, I think it's important for them to know that this is a severe disease and that clinical trials should be happening as soon as possible, as long as we're studying, adult onset FSH muscular dystrophy. I mean, there are always concerns about, toxicity of drugs, in kids versus adults. So these are all things that have to be considered as well.
So, if you could give a little more background on the MOVE study itself and how that's going to help with getting kids to the discussion point and what that, what it entails. I think there's a lot of ambiguity around what does it mean to be involved in the MOVE study? Does it keep you from other clinical trials? Is this expensive? How do I get involved? How do I get to a site that does it? So if you can give some backbone around the MOVE study, why and how would be really helpful.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that we are concentrating on right now is starting the pediatric patients. I mean, we already started that, but we're going to need funding to do some of the more extensive workup of these individuals, the early onset patients, to get more data. I mean, the low-hanging fruit is trying to kind of figure out the natural history. So how does somebody with early onset FSH progress over time? And then you have to kind of figure out, based on the drug that you're using, what is the expectation of that drug? Is there going to be an improvement in 3 months? Is it going to be 20% improvement, 10%, 5%? And that determines how many patients you need for a particular clinical trial to show a certain type of benefit. And so what we're collecting now for the pediatric patient is what we've done for the adults, which is what's the rate of progression based on function and measurement of strength in different muscles. But also we need to add that those biomarkers that may be early indicators of improvement, which one of which has been developed over the last few years specifically for muscle, and there are many new iterations of it where the analysis can be very, for example, MRI is, it has evolved so that it can show us very detailed, basically details about the status of the muscle. Is there a lot of normal muscle? Is there fat infiltration? Is there muscle fibrosis? And that may indicate to us, before somebody gets better, we'll see a change on the MRI. This is what we're moving towards. This has been developed over the last few years. The other two things that would be very important is, can we measure something in a muscle biopsy that tells us that the drug is working before we see any clinical improvement? Again, this is a little bit taxing for young patients to do a muscle biopsy. It may be difficult also for some of the patients who have very little muscle mass. What we would prefer is, something that you can do from a blood test. That would be ideal, but we don't right now, either for adults nor for kids, do we have a circulating biomarker that's confirmed to be reproducible in somebody who has FSHD.
Can I ask a few clarifying questions? It might sound as so, as I understand it, there's the MOVE study, which is now running at 12 locations in the US. And that one, children can enroll in that already.
Right.
And it's something that they see, let's say they see you in your office, and you measure do different strength and function measurements. So how long does a visit take?
It's
how
going
many
to be
times have they need to be?
Yeah. So what we were trying to do is make it feel like a regular visit, but we need a little bit more time than that. So if somebody is an established patient and you come in for a follow-up, it's a half-hour visit. It's going to be more like an hour and a half visit.
Okay,
And again, this is for pure MOVE protocol. For the
Right.
MOVE Plus are the patients on whom we do other things like MRI or muscle biopsies.
Right.
Again, all of those are optional. I mean, the minimum would be what we need really most of right now, and that's the easiest thing to get, is a large number of patients followed for a couple of years to get a
Right.
sense of how things move in early onset FSHD.
so the MOVE study, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jane.
So I'm just want to reiterate, the MOVE study is really like a doctor visit, maybe a little bit longer,
Right.
but no needles, no, none of that. Then there is a study that called MOVE Plus that has the doctor visit plus imaging in the magnetic resonance machine and biopsy. They probably also draw blood, right? Because you're
Right.
looking to see if you can correlate what's you see in blood with what's in the muscle, with what's in the imaging. And that part of it, I understand, like for children, you haven't really worked out the protocol yet, right? Or you need additional funding if you're going to include children. You need probably different.
Yeah, so what we need more funding for, which we don't have right now, but we're working on that, is for those other things that we talked about, the muscle biopsy. The blood samples we're collecting at the visit to all patients who are
For
in
MOVE as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
but the biopsy, the MRI are optional. These are for MOVE Plus. I mean, we are still important, but we understand that these are difficult things for somebody who's, young, and but these are things that we need to get to a certain point. Just, we have a good sense of what the biomarkers are on muscle biopsy in adults, and it may be possible that it's the same profile in kids, but we need to know that if that's going to be used in clinical trials.
Right. So, by the way,
There was one question from the chat. How frequently do you get evaluated during the MOVE study?
So right now, I mean, the protocol is once a year. But I know we've been having some feedback that maybe we have to do it every 6 months. I don't know what the right answer is, but again, doing it at 6 months is a burden, I think, on the family, especially that you're going to be, many of the patients may not have a center that's close by, so that means traveling a distance to a center that's doing the MOVE protocol. I mean, the other important part of that we are trying to do is to try to get funding also for travel, to allow the families to come to the visits and not have that be a financial burden on them.
I just posted in the chat a link to our page that shows where all the clinical trial network sites are, I guess, in case. Do you all know where the closest one is to you, or?
I
Yeah.
have a question about that. I went to the
Oh, Jesse, your audio is, we can barely hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, there you
Oh,
go.
that's better.
Okay, I'm sorry. The Cincinnati hospital, I emailed somebody about trying to get my daughter into a program for her, and they said that she was too young, that they wouldn't accept her because she was too, well, she just turned 3 today, so she's 3 today. But I'm having difficulties trying to find someone to look at her basically for studies because of her age. So I didn't know if you guys had any resources for children under 18, because I'm having difficulties, at least in my area, to find her some kind of resources for studies.
Yeah, so you're talking about Cincinnati, is that right, Jesse? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, most of us neuromuscular specialists will see adults and pediatric patients. We have a subgroup of the neuromuscular physicians are specialized pediatric neuromuscular physicians. So maybe it's because of the lack, but but you should be able to have your daughter seen by pediatric neurologists, but they may not be neuromuscular specialists. That's
Well,
what I'm thinking is the problem in your situation.
yeah. Although Jesse, did you contact the Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus? Is that where? I know we've corresponded, and I tried to. Oh, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I just I haven't been on here for a while, but I'm trying to find the email from the exact place right now. But I can always, touch base later. I don't want to waste
Okay, all right.
time. But yeah, I did reach out to them too, the people that you gave me before, and they haven't really, I sent all the information to them and they haven't really contacted me back. So I guess I need to call them and kind of follow up with that. But I haven't heard anything since they've got the documents from all the other doctors, like the release form or whatever that's called.
All right. Well, you can email me offline and I can give them a nudge. But I think Columbus, that's Columbus, it's a little drive for you, but it is a clinical trial network site, and I think they have a collaboration. I think the Nationwide Children's Hospital, which is part of that whole complex, they have pediatric neurologists. I might put you in touch with Renata. Is that her name, Renata?
Yeah, she moved though. She's no longer in Nationwide.
Oh no, where did she go?
She went to WashU.
Oh,
In
okay.
St. Louis. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll have to find there's other people I think I know at Nationwide. So but yeah, you could, Jesse, just email me and we'll try to all of these sites right now are super busy because they're trying to ramp up for the Fulcrum trial, and especially if they've lost somebody who was coordinating things there, that can slow things down for sure.
Is there an age limitation on the MOVE study?
No.
So with regards to the MOVE study, when you say that we need a substantial number of kids in it, do we have an idea of how many that is, of how many is needed in order to collect enough data to get the biomarkers set for clinical trials?
I think what we're hoping for is about 50 in
And
total.
do we know the numbers at today, where they are today for kids?
I don't, maybe about 15 or 20 right now, but I think less than that. But there are several sites who have a lot of pediatric patients who are joining very soon, actually.
Right.
Including Nationwide is one, University of Pennsylvania, University of Iowa. These are sites that have a lot of pediatric patients.
Okay. So Jesse's situation is one that Allie's definitely been working with and hearing a lot from parents. How do you find a good team for your child? Any advice for parents on how you go about getting a team together that can help you, and what you should be measuring on a yearly basis on kids to figure out what's going on with them and the progression?
Well, I mean, if you have a good neuromuscular specialist with an experienced physical therapist, that's really the basic things that you need. You know, at a center that has a lot of neuromuscular patients, we usually have a relationship with pulmonologists, and for certain muscle diseases, also cardiologists, but that's not needed for FSH in particular. But having a pulmonologist see your son or daughter is important. Again, this is one of the things that, you know, we did put out clinical guidelines for patients with FSHD back in 2016. We didn't have a lot of information about pediatric patients, but there are two things that are potentially very serious, which is, well, one is a rare occurrence, but it's important to monitor, is the retinal vascular disease that some patients can get, especially those with very few repeats on their DNA testing. And that can lead to blindness. Also, making sure to pick up hearing loss early, so that there's no delay in acquisition of language in a young child. So these are kind of the things that are specific for early onset FSH, and these are things that we're trying to also include, not in a visit as part of the MOVE protocol, but having that as a thing that we do, and referring patients to an ophthalmologist for retinal exam. Most of the kids will have had hearing tests when they go into school, but if you have a child that's not in school and has FSH, this is an important thing to make sure is working right, which is the hearing.
So
I'd like to give a boost to Dr. Tawill and what he and his colleagues are doing, and encourage folks with youngsters that have FSHD, or for that matter, other adults, to, if you can, see if you can join the trial, because it is a sacrifice. There's no question about that. There's no promise of treatment whatsoever, but the field really can't move forward until we understand the uniformity, the nature by which the disease progresses in various populations, and therefore how to direct treatment. And I can give the example from Genzyme, who was at the time attempting to develop a therapy which was ultimately approved for juvenile onset Pompe disease. And Kristen, much like yourself, there were many physicians who claimed they had databases, and it sounds like in your case, you actually probably have very good data, but it turns out these databases were essentially non-validatable. And what that is, that's a fancy way of saying when you actually looked at the record, it kind of stunk, right? I mean, it was well intended, but it was terribly incomplete. And so Genzyme had to do their own natural history study. In the case of a serious neonatal onset disease, it only took 2 years to get the study, but that was 2 years of delay. And so that's really what Dr. Tawill and his colleagues are trying to avoid, if you will, is by getting this groundwork laid firmly so we can understand how the disease progresses.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. Yeah, I mean, this is, again, we need to emphasize that, because I mean, when we are ready for a clinical trial, we're going to have not only certain tests that we do that have been reproduced and are, proven to be reliable, but also you have to train all of the physical therapists to do the test in the same way at every site. If not, you're not going to have reproducible results that you can use for a clinical trial. And that's really important. And that's why, clinical trials are complicated, because there are so many things that have to be put in place to make it happen and to make it successful. And all of, every visit of a patient that we can document in a systematic way across multiple sites, it's gold for us. I mean, we need that to say this is the protocol that we need that will show change over the shortest period of time. And that's why we do a lot of testing, and then some of them may not work in a clinical trial, but some of them may show. I mean, we've had this recently happen with Fulcrum also. I mean, this was a late addition to what they were planning to do, which is what's called the reachable workspace. So one of the main limitation in patients with FSH is the shoulder movement. And there is now a kind of an automated way of measuring that. And that's the one thing that showed change that differentiated patients who are on active drug than as opposed to on placebo. And so these are things, I mean, and so this is what we're planning to do right now, and it's going to take some time, but you don't want multiple trials to come and go and show nothing just because it's not well organized, or we didn't have the information that we needed to run a good clinical trial.
And
Yeah,
so-
I have to.
Yeah.
I just want to mention, we here at the FSHD Society, the companies come to us when they get interested in developing a therapy for FSHD. And one of the first questions they always ask is there a natural history study? That's like foundational. You cannot have clinical trials and drug development unless you have good natural history data. And we hear a lot from, families and patients and going like, oh, it's an observational study. I'm not interested. I will only participate in a drug trial. And I could understand why people would feel that way, but it's so important. So part of our educational mission to say we will never get to the drug trial until we have good natural history. That's absolutely fundamental. And while, we say, like, there's no benefit, you're not getting a drug, you're not getting treatment. But I do feel that there are intangible benefits for participating in a natural history study, especially in a rare disease. You're going to be seen by clinicians who understand FSHD, and they're going to get to know you. And I think that's, and a lot of the places, the clinical trial research network sites, you go there to participate in research, but you can also get clinical care there from the best clinical teams around for FSHD. So that's, and if you are in a trial and they have your records, or if you're in a study, a natural history study, but they have history on you now when there is a clinical trial, they're going to be very interested in enrolling your child, or if you're a patient yourself, in the study, because they have a lot of data on you already, and they know already that you're going to qualify for this. You meet these criteria. So these are kind of indirect benefits. They don't come from being in the study, but they are, they are, real advantages, I'd say, for participating in research.
And I'd add one more to that, June, for the kids that understand that you make them feel as if they're helping, that they're a part of the solution. And I think that there's, with the kids that I've talked with, there's value in that, where they feel like they are now part of something that's going to bring a solution about to something that they have to deal with every single day.
Yeah, and even adults will get that impression. I mean, I think that's the benefit. That's the benefit that you get. You're engaged. You're not sitting there waiting for things to happen, and you're contributing. I mean, for adults as well as kids, I mean, they feel better when they do that, and it's important. And again, going back, I mentioned that in 1990 when I told my partner Jeff Statland that we needed to do natural history studies. There was not in the NIH, there was no mechanism to do a natural history study. They wouldn't give funds for that until 2005, when they created a special fund for clinical trial readiness. And that year, we got the first and only one that they gave out that year. And this is what triggered all of what has happened until now with the network. And between 2010 and 2015, it was FSH Society was funding us for smaller, trial readiness studies that were not big enough. It was an important start, but we needed a big population, multiple sites to study that.
So Vera, you have a question you want to ask Dr. Tawill yourself?
Yeah, just I was planning to come to Rochester to see you for myself and my two daughters. Would we be able to do the MOVE study with your appointment, or are you actually the one conducting the MOVE study?
Yes, I am, and Vera, it would be good if you can contact our coordinator, research coordinator, and I can provide you with her. Let's see how.
I can send the information after this onto the parents group, and Vera, I can send you the information. And just to let you know, Vera, I just enrolled my daughter this past year, and it was an awesome experience for her. She is 11, so a little bit older than your girls, but she enjoyed it. They made it fun. It was like they just played games. That was the visit. And they gave her the choice if she wanted to draw blood or not. And so it was all of it was very gentle and at her pace and her speed. And she can't wait to go back. She really enjoyed the visit, and also meeting Dr. Katz. So I don't know if you want to give a little intro to who Dr. Katz is, but she also is amazing with kids.
Yeah, so Dr. Katz is a pediatric neuromuscular specialist. She just finished her training. And she's staying with us for at least another 2 years, hopefully longer. And she will be also part of the pediatric MOVE and MOVE Plus. We're trying to also include some other tests that we're trying to get funds from the FSH Society to enhance to increase some of the data that we're collecting. One thing that she'll be doing is ultrasound, which has been becoming very popular in muscle diseases, but and we're going to try to kind of compare ultrasound to MRI of the muscle and see what if we can collect. There's some data that suggests that you can collect some types of information about the muscle with ultrasound that you won't see on MRI. So that's one of the things that we're going to look at.
Yeah, my daughters had both done before we knew what was going on.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely be coming to Rochester to meet you. Thank you.
And I posted Leanne Lewis's email in the chat. She would be, she's a study coordinator. Right, if you,
And we got,
Thank you.
our physical therapist is outstanding. I mean, she's the one who actually trains all of the physical therapists who do the evaluations at all of the sites.
So any other questions on the MOVE study and, the necessity of getting the little ones into the MOVE study as soon as possible? I mean, it's just like the Fulcrum trial. You're sitting on, it doesn't start till we have it full. And that's, I think, another area that I know that I just recently learned as I'm going through this whole learning process of what clinical trials are about, that they don't start until they're full. Like Fulcrum's not, they're enrolling patients, but it has not started. That clock is not ticking. And if
well,
we had a 2-year
I could
run,
clarify on that because they do start people up on a rolling basis once they're ready. But like they have to collect data over a 48 weeks or something, a year basically. So the study cannot be completed until the last patient enrolls, is kind of the way to think about it. So the faster you get more people enrolled, the sooner
faster
you'll
you get.
complete the study. It's sort of,
yeah,
and it's the same for MOVE too. Like it's designed to, it requires a certain number of patients to be able to give you enough data to be meaningful. So again, like that one can't be completed until the last patient has enrolled and then gone through is it a 2-year, 18-month? I'm trying to remember, but the duration of the study. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So the sooner we can get the kids enrolled, the sooner that the clock starts. But for us to think that in 2 years, they're going to have the data on 15 kids is not going to achieve the end goal unless we get those numbers up.
And we're looking at the early onset FSH. They're divided into 2 categories. Those who have onset of shoulder weakness before the age of 10. As these are kind of from observation of kids with FSHD, they kind of fall into these 2 categories, either below the age of 10 onset of symptoms or after age of 10. And they're somewhat distinct one from the other, mostly based on severity, but FSH is very, very variable, even in kids. You can see a lot of differences between 2 kids with exactly the same genetic profile. And that's what makes it a little bit more trickier. I mean, there are certain diseases like Duchenne muscular dystrophy. The boys with Duchenne muscular dystrophy have a very predictable course. That's not the same in FSH muscular dystrophy.
And then is there a genetic test needed to enter your child into the MOVE study?
If somebody has not had commercial testing done, yes. Let me take that back. We need confirmation if there's a family history plus a person who clinically looks like FSH, and that's enough to enter the study. We'll be doing. I'm trying to get all of our protocols straight because there are many different protocols going on at the same time. But we're part of the MOVE study. We're going to be doing the methylation. So a spit test for FSHD. We're going to compare that to the regular lab test that is being done in commercial labs.
Is that the Jones spit test that you're?
Yep.
And you're going to compare that to the tests that are getting done by the doctor's offices?
Yes. Yep.
And that is to find out how accurate one test is over the other, or what differences you're finding?
I mean, Peter Jones has done a lot of work on this, but it's not been done. I think it has to be done in a kind of a more systematic way to be able to kind of say that this is a valid test. I mean, I think it is. I mean, I think most of us believe that, but really needs to be done in a more systematic way in a patient population that's well described, basically.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it's an interesting point, because the commercial tests that are available through Perkin-Elmer and the University of Iowa, they had to be validated before they could be accepted as a clinical test. So which meant that they had to run in a blinded study, like a bunch of samples from verified patients, and then controls, and then other neuromuscular disease and so on. You kind of had they had to run against, probably several hundred different samples to show that it's accurate and there aren't false negatives or false positives and all that kind of stuff. So they've been through that process so they can be accepted as diagnostic tests. So Peter Jones has offered this free saliva test, which everything we hear is scientifically a well-founded test, but people send him saliva samples from all over the world. He doesn't necessarily have all of their clinician records, nor do we know like what the clinicians are seeing. So there's not like this confirmation that the test is really strong, clearly correlated with clinical disease. I guess, Dr. Tawill, is that kind of a description of the situation? So now within the context of the MOVE study, you have Dr. Tawill and all of these other trained neurologists and physical therapists studying the same people, and you're doing the saliva test with those. So you can now get a much better validation of the saliva test as an FSHD diagnostic. That's the hope, right? That's the goal.
Can I share from the age of about 6 to 24, we got negative tests from Quest, Iowa, and Athena, all negative. And Peter Jones was positive, and Perkin-Elmer finally last year was positive. So that was our experience. And it was very clear clinically that that's what she had. But those were the only two that picked it up, and all the others did not. So that's just our experience.
Do you recall if what I'm suspecting, Lisi, is that maybe your daughter might have what's called FSHD Type 2, which is a rare, like 5% of FSHD cases are Type 2. And the test for that did not exist until more recently. So if she was tested earlier on, they only tested for Type 1 and would not have picked up, they would have come back as negative. And it was only, is that?
No, she's a classic, according to Peter Jones and Perkin-Elmer, she's classic FSHD 1 with one repeat. And all the others did not pick it up. But
that's
again,
interesting. Huh?
Yeah, he was the first to find it, and he said go to Perkin-Elmer. Their test will work for you because of the way I see the arrangement on her chromosome, whatever. I think she has a long arm, 4th chromosome, and so he said the probes on the others are missing it. Perkin-Elmer's is now sophisticated enough that it'll pick it up, and sure enough, he was right. So that was our experience.
FSHD genetics, it's always throwing a
So Dr. Tawill, just to clarify, if you want to put your child into the MOVE study, but they're not genetically diagnosed, but there is a history in the family, the child can still enter in, even though they haven't personally been diagnosed?
Yes, I mean, if they look like they have FSHD clinically, and they have a family member who's who has the same, I mean, then there's very little chance that it's going to be something else. Based on the inheritance pattern and the presentation of that patient.
Okay. Jesse?
What about if they have genetic proof of, her genetic testing came back positive, and then it also came back positive, like we paid extra for the second test to see what type it was, and she came back for type 2 because no one in our family has it, but they're not clinically diagnosing her yet. So would that be able to do the MOVE study?
So you mean that they were tested for type 1 and type 2, and they have both?
So we got
That's
tested.
possible, yes.
Okay, and it very well, like maybe
Yeah.
I'm not really even sure how to read
Yeah.
all of that. But we did pay extra to get a certain test after we got the original DNA test to see if she had the type 2, because they couldn't determine that, and they knew about the testing and all this stuff. So they want to wait, I guess, until she turns 4, so another year before we do another DNA test to, I guess, rule out anything else. That's why I was working with June to see if I could get a second opinion at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital, because I kind of disagreed with that, but I'm not a neurologist, so but for the MOVE study, I would be really interested in taking our daughter all the way to Rochester if I had to, because I'm one of those people that I'd rather her go and get seen by somebody to hopefully help another parent that might be going through what I'm going through, the unknown, that I have all this here, but I don't know what this means, and maybe another parent's going through that same thing. So I would be very interested in more information, to be able to go see another study or do a study, because I feel like Dylan, my daughter, would be so good for your guys' study, because she has all this genetic background, but she doesn't have a lot of features. We noticed her, she couldn't raise her arms up as a child, and so that I mentioned that and that's how this all started. And so she still can't raise her hands all the way up above her head without pain. So I guess that's where I'm at right now.
Well, we're happy to see you in Rochester.
Jesse, I'll reach out to you and we can collaborate and share and figure out how we can best help each other.
Thank you.
So any other questions for this evening that we didn't cover with regards to the MOVE study? I mean, I think the call to action is, if we can get the parents to really broadcast out to the rest of the parent community the importance of getting kids enrolled in the MOVE study. And we're really looking for those kids that are 10 and under. Is that the?
Well, both. We're looking for 10 and under and over 10.
And so that is one of the most important things we as parents can be doing. And then also I'm going to be working with another FSHD patient who creates a lot of social media campaigns in getting a blog up and running with the ability for us to share stories about our children that can be shared with the industry, so that they can actually physically see how these kids deal with life and what they're facing every single day in going through their life, so that there can be more of a empathetic side to see the actual children that we're trying to collect data on as well. So the more we can get parents involved in the action, and Allie's been trying to get this chapter up and running from that perspective, the better. So the call to help is for all of you guys that joined tonight. Thank you so much, but also please help us spread the word. We can't just do it alone.
I think getting that blog and showing the disease in individual patients is terribly important. There are, in my opinion, misconceptions about the nature of FSHD, and understanding just exactly how severe is when it happens is terribly important.
So yes, we are just trying to figure out the channel. We actually have some content brewing, but we will then be really leaning on parents once we have that channel up, and it's not going to be something that's going to be seen by the public. We will have it, password protected so that it's not out there for everyone to see. It's more meant for industry purposes. So, well, thank you, everybody. Anything else before we adjourn?
Well, I just want to mention, because I noticed there's some parents here whose children had early onset but are now adults. And I think they would also be eligible for the MOVE study, right?
Yeah.
I mean, every patient is so precious in a rare disease. The more every patient contributes to the body of knowledge that will help us get to treatments.
Dr. Tawill, could you say what your definition of early onset is again?
Shoulder weakness before the age of 10.
Okay, because myself and my daughters don't have shoulder weakness. We have other weaknesses. We have hearing loss, facial paralysis. My daughter's now showing some hip and knee weakness. So are you saying that we're not early onset, or?
So when did those symptoms start?
For myself, I've had facial paralysis, asymmetrical, since I was 2 years old, but it's
Okay.
never progressed. And so my daughters lost their smile when they were 2. Hearing loss was, they failed their newborn screening, my one daughter.
Yeah, so
And one daughter's having mobility issues.
yeah, so I think we have to be a little bit broader in our definition of it. And again, because of my experience also with a child whom I saw at 1 year of age, though he was 2, and he had retinal vascular disease and hearing loss, and mom took him to the neurologist, and she looked it up on Google and said he has FSH, and went to the neurologist, and he said no, he doesn't. And she forced him to do the test, and he turns out to have FSH. And I followed him for about 10 years, expecting that he was going to be severely affected, but he was not. He just had some facial weakness, but at the age of 11, before they moved out of Rochester, he was not weak. And that's some of the challenges that we see with FSH, because it's not always a predictable course. And we always take that into consideration.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's so variable. I just, the term early onset is confusing. Thank you.
Sure.
I find the entire thing confusing, so. So, all right, well, thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Tawill, for joining us this evening. I know you got a busy schedule, so appreciate your time and chatting with us tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good night.